The Memphis Grizzlies fight admirably after another slow first quarter, but the Detroit Pistons pick up a win. Memphis has now lost 3 straight games. We're going to break it all down, what changes can be made, and why Charles Bassey is going to make his biggest impact here down the road for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, friends. Welcome to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, a post-Grizzlies Pistons edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax. Thank you so much for being with me. No DeMichael Cole on this edition of the show. DeMichael, of course, closing up his coverage for the Commercial Appeal as the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. He will be back with us on our next edition of the show, but you got me for the next 30 or so minutes with you talking Grizzlies basketball. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can hang out with myself and or DeMichael Cole each and every time that an episode drops. Become an everydayer. Thank you so much to everybody that has swung by the last few episodes. It is much appreciated. Hopefully you're choosing to stay a while and making us here at Locked On Grizzlies your first choice each and every day for Memphis Grizzlies and NBA content. The Memphis Grizzlies have lost 3 basketball games in a row, and that feels bad. I'm not going to ever say that you should feel proud about your squad losing multiple games consecutively. However, second night of a back-to-back, flying home from Toronto, the craziness of the Ja Morant suspension, everything that went into this contest, it felt like an opportunity for things to go uglier than they did. And I know that's a really low bar to clear. I'm not going to advocate for this line of thinking often, but I do think that the fact that Memphis fought back, the fact that you saw some signs of growth from players like a Cedric Coward, and we'll talk more about him later on in the show, you saw opportunity being taken advantage of in this Tuomas Isalo scheme by Jaren Jackson Jr. That matters tremendously. And we're going to start with Jaren because Jaren was one of the reasons the team started slowly in that first half, especially on the offensive end. Jaren Jackson Jr. only took 3 shots in the first half against the Detroit Pistons, and that is not going to get the job done. And it's certainly not going to quiet any concerns or frustrations from fans about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s role in this offense and how Tuomas Isalo's system is going to maximize the best players on the Memphis Grizzlies, namely Ja Morant and, of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr. is playing out of position a large amount of the time, as much as you and I and most others may want Jaren Jackson Jr. to be a center. He is not a center. He might play some backup center minutes when the team is healthy, but that is not his ideal spot, no matter how badly I may want it to be. And once you accept that Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a center, even in the backup variety, it allows for you to better understand why a Jock Landale, or as we'll talk more about later on in the show, Charles Bassey, should be in the conversation for being a starter moving forward and somebody that plays significant minutes on this team, with Zach Edey hopefully returning soon, ramping up, practicing with the Memphis Hustle. That was reported on Monday. That's good to see. So Edey should be back soon. That's great. That's going to help Jaren Jackson Jr. even more. But the reason that a Jock Landale or a Charles Bassey, despite the fact that they are not as good as other players on this Grizzlies roster, the reason that those guys keep getting those minutes and those reps is because the best version of Jaren Jackson Jr. is at the 4. Where was it offensively on Monday night? It didn't show up early enough. It certainly showed up in the second half. And whatever switch was flipped, whatever motivational speech or tweak of a scheme, however that got Jaren going on his way to a season-best evening offensively, more of that, please. Because that's exactly what the Memphis Grizzlies need if they are going to be competitive moving forward. They also continue to need Ja Morant to be not just a scorer of the basketball, but also a facilitator of the basketball. And double-digit assists for Ja against the Pistons is a great example of that. He had his way getting penetration in and around the rim, but the Pistons did a good job contesting, not allowing for Ja to have clean looks, whether it was on his floater, any sort of finish at the 10. Ja had bodies and limbs and all sorts of difficulties thrown all around him. The Pistons made the conscious choice to try to force the ball out of Ja's hands. And Alstar Thompson did a phenomenal job, 4 steals in the contest, creating turnovers off of Ja Morant. Not just Ja Morant, but the Grizzlies at large. The Grizzlies had far too many turnovers again. If you're an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, you know that's my stat to watch just about every game. And the Grizzlies had 20 turnovers. That's way too many. The Pistons scored far too many points off of those Grizzlies turnovers. That's a major reason that the Memphis Grizzlies lost this contest. 20 stocks for the Pistons, 11 steals, 9 blocks. That's not going to get the job done. It's just not, especially against a talented team, a good basketball team like the Detroit Pistons. But even with Ja's turnover troubles, 5 turnovers, way too many turnovers for Ja Morant. Even with those shooting concerns, if Rudy Gay 12 years ago had posted a 5 of 16 shooting night and scored 18 points on 16 shots, there'd be a lot of pissed off Memphians complaining about how inefficient that offensive contribution was. So it certainly wasn't sunshine and rainbows from Ja. But Morant was able to get to the charity stripe, 8 for 9 from the free throw line. He was able to create those offensive looks for guys like Cam Spencer, for guys like Cedric Coward. He put the offense on his back in a different way in terms of being able to be that facilitator and help get those looks and keep the Grizzlies in the contest. Memphis was down at halftime by 10 points. The Grizzlies win the second half only by 2 points, unfortunately. 10 minus 2 is 8, so the Pistons, of course, come away with the victory. But the Grizzlies played better in the second half, and one of the reasons for that was Ja Morant and his ability to create. Another reason for why the Grizzlies played better in that second half is the fact that, to be frank, Jalen Wells and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, especially Wells, but KCP as well down the stretch, both of those guys saw their minutes reduced a little bit. We're going to talk more about Cedric Coward here more in a moment. Coward played 31 minutes off the bench in this contest. So it's not like Tuomas Isalo is saying that Cedric Coward is not capable, right? We're going to talk about who Cedric Coward should play with moving forward. And if you're on YouTube, I'm killing the lead a little bit with our title block for today. But 31 minutes off the bench, only guy that played more minutes in this contest than Cedric Coward was Ja Morant at 35. Jaren Jackson Jr. also logged 30 minutes in the game. So you're looking at a situation where Cedric Coward is being relied on as a rookie, and he's delivering 17 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, too many turnovers. But again, he's a rookie. That's probably one of the reasons that Isalo is not really depending on him to be that starter. But when you watch this team struggle early on, again, the Grizzlies lost the first quarter by 7 points. It was a much more competitive game the remainder of the contest, but Memphis was never able to dig out of that hole. Every time they went on a run, got the game within 4, 5, 6 points, the Pistons would hit a 3. Or there would be a turnover that led to a transition opportunity for Detroit. And the Grizzlies aren't good enough at this stage of the game to be able to overcome that momentum swing. They can't give up possession and allow for the Pistons to score off of those extra possessions. That is how the Grizzlies lost the game against Detroit on Monday night. And now Memphis is staring down the barrel of a losing streak. The Memphis Grizzlies are not where they want to be. They are 3-5 overall in terms of record. DeMichael and I have talked about numerous times. Hovering around 500 should be the goal with so many guys out. Zach Edey apparently going to be coming back soon. You definitely will see guys like Ty Jerome after that. Then down the road, Scottie Pippen Jr., Brandon Clark. The cavalry is slowly but surely coming, but you got to be able to win these games. There are no moral victories in the National Basketball Association. And if the Memphis Grizzlies hope to stay in the play-in conversation, they cannot fall that far below 500. And things are going to get tougher from here. The schedule gets more difficult for the Grizzlies, even more so than a plucky, talented playoff team in the Detroit Pistons. Make sure you're hitting me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Let me know how you're feeling about the Grizzlies fighting to the finish, but falling short against the Detroit Pistons. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, I have made my decision as to who Cedric Coward should be starting next to in the backcourt for the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to talk about that next. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. You can see exactly what you're going to pay up front. No hidden fees at checkout. I love that feature. Plus, you can see exactly what your view is going to be like before you buy your tickets with the Game Time in-app seat view feature. You can even find NBA tickets that are under $25. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Check out Game Time today. So today is election day in my home state of Virginia. Shout out to Virginia. Go vote if you are a Virginian checking out this podcast. Go vote if you are a New Yorker checking out this podcast, or somebody that lives in the great state of New Jersey. Anywhere where an election might be taking place, go participate. It is your most important civic responsibility. All that being said, in the spirit of election day, I have made my ballot clear. I have chosen who should be replaced by Cedric Coward in the Memphis Grizzlies starting lineup. And it is not Jalen Wells. It is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope that should be replaced by Cedric Coward. You might be wondering why. Why KCP, the veteran presence, the guy who you were being so high on in the preseason, Joe? If you follow me on X at Joe Mullinax, you know I was pretty happy with how Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was performing. Why now then do I think this is the time to move on from the man known as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope when it's not like Jalen Wells is performing that much better, right? Let me explain. First off, I think that Jalen Wells is a player that you have to remember is somebody that the Grizzlies are investing in long-term. Jalen Wells was an all-rookie team member last season. Jalen Wells, for his flaws, and he has flaws, Jalen Wells has a game that fits exactly what the Memphis Grizzlies are looking for from that two-guard spot. And Jalen Wells is somebody that the team perceives as a long-term piece to this roster. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was kind of sort of money that was brought over to make the Desmond Bane trade work. And that doesn't mean that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope does not have value on this current Grizzlies roster. Of course he does. I'm not advocating for KCP to fall out of the rotation or for Memphis to try to trade him. I just think it's time to better use KCP. I think that he has a skill set as a 3-and-D wing that is more conducive to what the reserves need, especially when you consider the fact that Santi Aldama, while he remains an offensive weapon, is struggling in his own right defensively. So look at the current Grizzlies starting lineup. You've got Ja Morant, non-negotiable, right? Jaren Jackson Jr., non-negotiable. Those two guys are going to be starters. Then one of Jock Landale, Charles Bassey, eventually Zach Edey, somebody that plays the center position is almost certainly going to log that starting role at the 5 so that Jaren can start his game off at the 4, as we talked about earlier. As much as I would like for Jaren to be a center, he's better at the power forward spot next to a true big. That's just the reality of the situation. The last 2 spots are open. And when you look at who has been starting in those spots, Jalen Wells, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, both of them are limited offensively, right? Against the Pistons, as a matter of fact, both KCP and Jalen Wells combined to shoot 2 of 18 from the field. 2 of 18. That is putrid. Putrid performance offensively for 2 of your starting perimeter players that you're depending on to score points on the wing. If Jalen Wells, who shoots 2 for 14, 0 for 7 from beyond the arc, is not able to hit his shots, then how in the world can the Grizzlies run a functioning offense? If Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is not able to not only make shots, but also create offense in terms of assists, attack the glass. He is not able to contribute in that role as a starter. Cedric Coward can do it. Cedric Coward can fill that void. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as wonderful of a career as he has had, is not somebody that the Memphis Grizzlies are going to have on this roster 2 years from now. It's extremely unlikely. You know who's likely to be on this roster 2 years from now? Jalen Wells. And you continue to invest in that. You continue to invest in that player, a player who had 6 rebounds. Outside of Charles Bassey, who we'll talk more about here in a moment, Cedric Coward had 6 rebounds, so did Jalen Wells. Ja Morant had 6 rebounds, so did Jalen Wells. Wells is able to rebound with his bigger frame from the perimeter spot. Jalen Wells had 3 assists and no turnovers. One of the biggest questions that Michael Cole and I have had about Jalen Wells, can he be a facilitator? Can he create offense, not just for himself, but for others? And he's not perfect in that regard by any stretch. I would argue he's not even Desmond Bane in that regard at this stage of the process. But Jalen Wells is developing. Jalen Wells has room for a growth spurt in terms of his ceiling. Doesn't mean he's going to be an all-star. Doesn't mean he's going to be an elite starter in the NBA. But DeMichael oftentimes talks about that elite role player. Jalen Wells has that capacity. He's on the ascending scope and scale toward that goal. I think it's fair to say that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope might be on the backslide of that process. So when you have a player that is like that, does it make sense to keep trying to fit the square peg in the round hole and you keep him in that starting group? I would argue no. I would argue that now is the time to replace KCP with Cedric Coward. And it allows for 2 wings in Coward and Wells that need chemistry to be developed if they're going to be your perimeter players of the future. Now's the time. Now's the time to develop that chemistry. Now's the time for them to work together, not just in closing lineups, because that's important to point out. If you're one of those folks that thinks it's overrated talking about who a starter is, yes, you're correct. It was Wells and it was Coward out there at the end, and they had a chance to win the game with those guys on the court together, playing those perimeter spots. Why not do it from the jump? Why resign yourself to an offensive scheme or an offensive rotation system where you're going to have a group that is potentially going to go 2 for 18 from the field? You're hamstringing yourself. When you combine Ja being 5 for 16, that means that you were, well, let's do some quick math, 34 shot attempts, 7 made buckets. That's roughly 27%, 27 or 28 from the field, from all your perimeter players combined. You're not going to win many basketball games when your offense is that stagnant on the perimeter. Cedric Coward is not stagnant. Cedric Coward is a force of nature. Cedric Coward is undeniable. Let the guy be undeniable from the start of the game. Let him be the one that helps set the tone, that gets out and runs, that's aggressive on the glass. Imagine the switchability between he and Jalen Wells. Imagine the capacity those 2 guys would have to be able to mix and match coverages, finding the opposing team's best shooter, hedging and blitzing off of screens. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope can do those things too, but you just have a different youthful energy when Cedric Coward is out there. The vibe is different. And you're investing in Jalen Wells, not just in the here and now, but beyond this time. You, in part, made the Desmond Bane trade as the Memphis Grizzlies because you believe in Jalen Wells. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is not here to replace Desmond Bane. He's here to be a veteran leader. He's here to contribute. He was not the true salary cap filler. That was Cole Anthony, as we now know. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has a role to play in this team, but it is not the same as what Jalen Wells is going to be asked to be moving forward. And with that in mind, on this election day, I am voting for Cedric Coward and Jalen Wells to be the starting backcourt forward/guard edition of the Memphis Grizzlies moving forward. Do you agree with me? Do you think it's time for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to come off the bench? Or do you think that Jalen Wells should be the one that's a reserve and you want to keep the veteran out there with Cedric Coward? Or do you disagree with me entirely and you think Cedric Coward should continue to come off the bench because the minutes are the same as if he would be a starter and bringing that energy can help revitalize a system and revitalize a scheme, it's better suited for a rookie as a reserve. I think there's lots of different angles we can take. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X how you're feeling. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this edition of the show talking about Charles Bassey and what his likely biggest impact on the Memphis Grizzlies will be. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Say you sat down to check out Grizzlies Pistons, and you were a few minutes late. You missed the first 5 minutes of the contest. Even if you missed the start of the game, or you want to ride the hot hand like Jaren Jackson in the second half, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Go and check them out today. Big fans of FanDuel. Closing out this edition of Locked On Grizzlies, it is I, Joe Mullinax. Thank you so much, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you're getting podcasts, make sure you continue to like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. I am grateful that you're with me. I know DeMichael Cole is grateful that you are with us. It's been a great start to the month of November, not necessarily for the Memphis Grizzlies, as we alluded to the last couple of episodes, but it has been a good month for Locked On Grizzlies so far, and we appreciate that. Continue to stick with us. Make us your first NBA Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that episode drops. We're going to get out of here today talking about Charles Bassey. And if you are an everyday to Locked On Grizzlies, you know that I am not the biggest Jock Landale fan. Landale played 30 minutes against the Pistons. Charles Bassey finally got some playing time logged. He played 15 minutes. So you do some simple math there between two true bigs, Jock Landale and Charles Bassey. That means that Jaren Jackson Jr. only played, 3-ish minutes at the 5 spot. That's probably the best use of Jaren Jackson Jr. and the fact that he had his best offensive game of the season. While that is the case, probably isn't an accident, right? But Jock Landale scores 13 points. Jock Landale knocks down a couple of threes. Jock Landale only grabs 5 rebounds. Jock Landale was out-rebounded by Jalen Wells, Ja Morant, Cedric Coward, and Charles Bassey. And Charles Bassey grabbed double the rebounds that Jock Landale did in half the time. Now you, dear listener, dear viewer, may point to the stat sheet and say that Jock Landale is a 3-point threat. Jock Landale knocked down a 3 that Charles Bassey would not have made late in the contest that gave the Grizzlies a chance. And to that, I will say, I agree with you. I agree. When the Grizzlies are down in that situation, it makes much more sense for Jock Landale to be the starting center, or at least the center that is on the floor. But Charles Bassey, to the credit of Tuomas Isalo, who I have been hard on these last couple of episodes of Locked On Grizzlies, ironically, Bassey showed the value of what a true big does in the Isalo system better than Jock Landale. Because Landale launching threes is not what Zach Edey is going to be asked to do. What Charles Bassey did in this contest is what Zach Edey is going to be asked to do. 10 rebounds in 15 minutes played, a block, a steal, a physical force. Bassey is the enforcer. He's the guy that goes in there and brings that physicality in and around the paint that has been lacking this entire season, including the reality that Jock Landale has played a lot of minutes for this Grizzlies team. If we're going to sit here and say the best thing that Jock Landale brings to the Memphis Grizzlies is 3-point shooting, Jay Huff was able to do that. Jay Huff should still be here if that is something that you're prioritizing when it comes to Jock Landale. So it's nice to have it. But it's not what the point of these transactions has been. And Charles Bassey proves that that rebounding can create so much more opportunity. Charles Bassey proves that within the Tuomas Isalo system, having a big that can do those things is significant. It allows for Ja Morant and others to create on and around and off of those actions. Plus, the rebounding development is key because it allows for transition opportunities when you don't have to crash the glass as much. So Charles Bassey allows for us with a reminder that this scheme, this system is actually built around the type of guy that Charles Bassey is, that Zach Edey is. And while Jock Landale technically could be that guy, he's doing his best Jay Huff impression, and he is not contributing in the way that Isolo has said numerous times he wants those bigs to contribute. So Charles Bassey finally gets playing time, as DeMichael Cole has been calling on the entire time, as I've been calling on slightly less consistently. And Bassey does exactly what you would hope a true big would do in this scheme. Charles Bassey's 10-day contract to be coming up here in the next couple of days. The hardship waiver and all that sort of stuff. What will the Grizzlies do? That's a great question. I said on X at Joe Mullinax that I would waive Landale Monday night and sign Charles Bassey for the year. I was that impressed. Landale is not giving you what you are arguing or should be arguing for him to be giving you consistently as a screener, as a rebounder. You got it. You saw it from Charles Bassey in half the time. How long will Zach Edey be out? That's a fair question, and I think we're going to get our answer to that depending on how this hardship waiver process goes for the Grizzlies here in the days to come. So kudos to Charles Bassey, making the most of his minutes, 15 minutes, 10 rebounds, noticeably helped the Grizzlies get back into the fight against the Detroit Pistons. A reminder of what Zach Edey, admittedly better than Charles Bassey, should be bringing to the team when he returns to the lineup. Thank you so much for being with me on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The next time that we're together here on Locked On Grizzlies will be the Wednesday edition of the show. Remember, technically, this episode went live on Monday night, but it is the Tuesday edition of the podcast. The Grizzlies are back in action against the Houston Rockets on Wednesday. I'm sure we'll be previewing that contest with our good buddy DeMichael Cole. Again, pointing out that is another home game for the Grizzlies. Because it is a home game for the Grizzlies, that means I'll be flying solo once more on Wednesday, talking Grizzlies basketball with you, recapping Grizzlies Rockets, and looking ahead to what will be a very important run beyond Houston. The Grizzlies have a game on Friday against Dallas and then a game on Sunday early evening against the Thunder. This is not the easiest stretch of the season for the Memphis Grizzlies, trying to survive and endure while still being without Zach Edey and Ty Jerome and Scottie Pippen Jr. and Brandon Clark. That remains the name of the game, and they got to try to knock off one of these teams coming up. How can they beat the Rockets? I'm sure that'll be a focus of our next episode. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google. Make sure you are making DeMichael and I a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Become an everydayer if you are not already one. Hang out with us and make our little corner of the internet that we like to call Locked On Grizzlies that much better for having you be a part of it. Until next time, stay locked in. Enjoy the rest of your day, your night, whenever you're taking in the show. We're free and available. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies. See you.